When it comes to violence, men often take the lead, driven by their physical dominance and nature. This trend extends to the world of serial killers, where male perpetrators are far more common. But make no mistake, female serial killers do exist, and their crimes can be just as chilling. Let's uncover the stories of some of the most ruthless women and their shocking reactions to the harsh sentences handed down to them. Janelle Bourre, the young mother and wife of Greg Bourre, reportedly made a call to 911, reporting a rather odd incident of homicide that happened in her home. Per her report, she stated that her husband shot her, and then he shot himself. Straight in the forehead. The story looked crooked, but a panicking woman. And in a time like this where anything happens, one could easily believe something like that. Worse, this happened on the 14th of February, Valentine's Day.
My husband and I were in an argument, and he shot me, and then he killed himself.
Janelle picked up her phone and called 911, moaning and weeping over the phone, before she stated that her husband just tried to kill her. When she was asked about her husband, she said he was dead. The story she stated was that her husband tried to kill her, but he missed the shot and got a less lethal shot at her before he shot himself in the forehead with the gun. She called 911 to report the case and also to request assistance, as she stated that she was losing a lot of blood. All this while, she was crying while speaking to the representative. With all being said, it was a case of suicide. And had it been her husband didn't kill himself, this would have been a case of attempted murder. But then, did her husband really kill himself? Or does the Eve descendant just so happen to be telling a lie?
When in our combined 40 years have we ever heard of the intended target of a murder-suicide survivor?
Over the last 40 years of my job as a detective, never have we had a case where the victim of a murder-suicide survived. Words of a detective, Sergeant Warren Misner, who was let in on the details of the case.
He was such a good man. He was one of those really good people that's hard to come across now, it seems.
While in the outside world, Greg and Janelle lived a very comfortable and happy life. The couple were pretty much happy with each other and their lives. Janelle worked in a post office on some days anyways, while Greg worked the third shift at a major pharmaceutical company. It was also the second marriage for both Greg and Janelle, and they seemed to live together happily in spite of all that surrounded them.
Across the head with my open hand like that. He just went crazy. He grabbed the gun and shot up.
How many times?
I don't know.
When the cops came to the house, they saw the lifeless body of Gregory lying on the floor with a gunshot wound to his forehead. When they checked the garage, they found Janelle on the floor, bleeding from a gunshot wound on her hand. She stated that Greg shot her and then killed himself, as she had already told the 911 operative. But the police found the story to be a bit sketchy due to the awkward way that Greg fell, and they immediately ruled it out as a case of suicide, as the case looked more like a homicide with Janelle killing her husband. It was later discovered that the pair were going through a divorce prior to the time when Gregory died, and at that point, they had both been estranged, having not really been talking to each other. Plus, their kids weren't in the house when it happened. Janelle said they were having an argument, and then he pulled out a gun, shot her arm, and then killed himself.
When forensic tests were conducted, it was soon revealed that Gregory Bourre had not shot himself. In fact, it was Janelle who shot him before firing more rounds into the room. She was also the one who shot herself in the arm because she needed the police to believe the story.
After the police took the murder, or should I say suicide weapon, and forensics did their tests and all, they discovered that it was indeed a murder and not a suicide case, with Janelle killing her husband and then firing several shots in the room. She went further to shoot herself in the arm to make her story look more convincing. Crime Lab Sergeant Jim Dunlop believes that Janelle killed her husband and staged the scene to look like a murder-suicide attempt. At this point, there was nothing Janelle could do anymore. Her plot had been discovered, and there was nothing she could do to get out of what she was already in. After investigations and scanning through the murder scene using straight lasers to determine where the gun was shot from, it was proven, as Jim Dunlop stated, that she killed Gregory in his sleep and then proceeded to make the scene look like a murder. There was no escaping this time around, as she was pretty much caught on all fronts.
She had no idea on how we investigate shooting scenes or our ability to figure out who is standing in which position and able to really backtrack the flight path of these bullets. I'm not surprised anymore. I've been doing this for 24 years, and it would certainly be harder if they did their homework.
Her inability to understand how these investigators investigate crime, and especially shooting scenes, simulating what happened prior to the moment it happened, being able to determine who was where and when they were there. It was easy peasy, as Jim Dunlop stated.
He had done some type of facial damage to an eye orbital. Anyone willing to go to that measure certainly is capable of shooting themselves in the arm.
While Janelle claimed that her husband abused her domestically and was really mean to her, everyone interviewed said the exact opposite of that, Gregory being a really nice and amazing person. Warren Misner stated that after they were able to contact her ex-husband and had a session with him, he mentioned that he was detained at a point for domestic violence against his wife. However, in reality, he didn't touch her. As a matter of fact, she hit herself so hard and slapped her face and eye that she had scars. Reporting to the police in the 21st century as a lady with scars on your face, that man is going to get the harshest punishment ever. But in this case, she inflicted that on herself. So Sergeant Warren stated that if she could do that to herself, then there's a high chance she could also shoot herself in the arm, just to make sure she was not being convicted of murder. But the police aren't a group of 10-year-olds.
I've been instructed by my attorney not to say anything about him present.
I thought your attorney was a girl.
That was my divorce attorney, and she referred me to another attorney.
And who is that? What's his name?
Randall Levine.
Oh, so you actually retained Randy? I'm not asking questions, so just tell you a few things. I'll tell you that I think it's highly suspicious to me that you would contact a criminal attorney when your husband tried to kill you and killed himself.
Is that what he is?
She also let herself down a little bit more. As she was called into the interrogation room and the deputies were questioning her, she stated to them that she was instructed by her attorney not to say anything about the case to anyone unless he was there with her. When she then stated the name of her attorney, it put her in a deeper hole, as the attorney was a defense attorney for criminals, Randy Levine, a very prominent attorney for criminals, specifically when she wasn't a criminal, per her story. This placed her right in the middle of the radar, and all suspicion was already coming true and having a sort of headway. In no time, she was arrested, as all evidence was adequate and accurate enough to sentence her.
She entered a guilty plea for second-degree murder, which inevitably reduced the possibility of her being sentenced to life in prison. In February 2018, Janelle finally stood in court as her former in-laws gave impact statements.
While she initially started by saying he was a violent man, every other person that came up said something different. She changed her appeal to a guilty plea, as entering a guilty plea would pretty much prevent her from getting a rather intense punishment. It was in February 2018 when she appealed for second-degree murder.
Sharon Bourre, Gregory's mother, told the court and Janelle that her son didn't have to die. She said, "You had no right to kill my son. He did nothing but believe you, take you in, and love you. I can only hope that where you are going, you get all of the attention you crave and more."
The mother of Gregory took the stand first off and stated to the suspect that she had no reason to kill her son. The reason being he wasn't mean to her in any way at all, and she didn't deserve a cold death from her. She told her that she wishes she gets the attention she craves in jail. His brother did not hold back when giving his statement, telling Janelle bluntly that he'd never forgive her, and also highlighting the pain she had caused her kids as well. He didn't hold back and said it as it came to heart. He made a statement that shook the entire courtroom. He told the court that he only wishes he could trade her selfish and wicked life for Gregory's.
Before Janelle was sentenced, she simply turned and apologized to the judge for taking Gregory's life. She was sentenced to 17 to 19 years in prison.
Right before the sentence was read, Janelle turned to the judge and apologized to him for taking Gregory's life, as if it meant anything at that point in time. She was then sentenced to jail for 17 to 19 years, which I feel is pretty small for someone who committed a murder, with the reason for the murder being a valid lie. Kristenrossom, a case of a cheater and a drug addict trying to hide her secrets from her husband and thought that the best way of doing that was by killing the guy. Meet Kristenrossom, who murdered her husband in order to cover up a crime. She was born in Memphis, Tennessee, to a father who was a professor and her mother who worked at Azusa Pacific University. She had 2 brothers. After her father got a promotional employment, her family moved to Virginia, where she changed schools and attended an all-girls school named St. Catherine's School, located in Richmond. It was there that she started her smoking and drinking habits. It was so bad to the extent that the marijuana started having effects on her, and she had to stop smoking marijuana and then started taking meth. She later moved back to California in 1994 and then enrolled in the University of Redlands as a part-time student. But she didn't stay there for long, as she left in almost no time following a relapse. Eventually, she got over her addiction to drugs, and that was when she met the supposed love of her life in the year 1998, Greg DeVillers. There, she enrolled in San Diego State University, and she was able to graduate with honors that year. She worked at the San Diego County Medical Examiner's office after she graduated, and then the pair got married the next year, in 1999. A marriage that only lasted 1 year, and not because of a divorce, but because one of the pair was an executioner and found reason to end the life of their compatriot. Exactly 4 days after DeVillers confronted his wife about his suspicions of her using drugs again, and the fact that she was having an affair with her boss in the office, Dr. Michael Robertson. He told her to quit her job at the Medical Examining Center, but she didn't listen to him. It was the 6th of November, the year 2000, on a Thursday when Rossom called 911 and reported a possible case of suicide, telling the operatives that he had not been feeling well and she just got back now and met his body on the floor. And he wasn't breathing. DeVillers was dead. It wasn't until 10:19 that the paramedics who took his body were able to confirm that he was actually dead.
The test results came back and they showed that he had 7 times the lethal dose of fentanyl in his system.
While Rossom told the police that DeVillers committed suicide, his family didn't believe that, as they all attested to the fact that he was not a suicidal person. The police reluctantly decided to open an investigation on the case and first decided to carry out an autopsy on DeVillers' body. Normally, they would have done the autopsy at the examining center where his wife works, but to prevent a conflict of interest, they took the body elsewhere to get the autopsy done. A month after DeVillers' death, Rossom and her lover Robertson were fired from the center because of Rossom's constant consumption of meth and the fact that Robertson was backing her up with supply. Finally, when the results of the autopsy came out, it showed that DeVillers had died of an overdose of fentanyl, a very powerful synthetic opiate. With this, a case opened up and something wasn't clear to the police. Nothing was clear except for the fact that this was a case of homicide and not suicide. DeVillers was poisoned. It was 7 months after her husband's death when the police felt that they had gathered enough evidence to arrest her, as she was charged for the murder of her husband. Her prosecutor stated that she killed her husband to keep him from telling her superiors that she was dating a co-worker and also to expose her incessant abuse of meth, while the defense stated that he was suicidal and he killed himself. While that was a theory that the family of DeVillers seemed to agree with, especially his brother, Jerome DeVillers. The reason being, he was not a suicidal person, and he pretty much had no reason to commit suicide. Rossom's testimony was that she went to work early in the morning and got back in the early afternoon to administer soup to her husband and then went back to work. She came back by 7 p.m., went in to take her bath, and shaved her legs. After she got out of the bath, she went to the room and saw his lifeless body on the bed. That was when she went to call 911.
2 more breaths. Pump his chest 15 more times. Okay, 2 more breaths. You're doing fine.
There was a clip that showed that she was actually correct in administering CPR to her husband while on the 911 call. From her voice, there was obvious strain and pressure as she was even weeping from what you could hear. But even with this, there still was something wrong. Maybe she left out the part where she added the fentanyl to the soup she administered to DeVillers.
After using fentanyl, however, the amount of fentanyl in his system showed that this wasn't possible. Tests also revealed that the dose of fentanyl had been administered around the time that Rossom went home and gave her husband soup. Prosecutors claim that Rossom had killed her husband to hide her affair and her meth addiction. So, on November 12, 2002, Rossom was found guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and a $10,000 fine.
While the autopsy reports showed that the dose of fentanyl in DeVillers' body matched the time frame at which she got back home to give her husband soup, the not guilty plea was covered. As a result of this, she was charged with first-degree murder and was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole, plus a $10,000 fine.
In a very short clip, she could be seen crying. Kristenrossom killed her husband to hide her addiction and affair.
In this very short clip, we could see Rossom in a very emotional state as she was crying profusely following her sentence. It might have been a different case altogether if she had pleaded guilty to the crime. A lighter sentence would have been a likely possibility, but she decided to go Magna Defender, and she got what she deserved eventually. Jennifer May. Jennifer Mee is a 19-year-old in the Pinellas County Justice Center. She was arrested for first-degree murder, but this isn't the first time Jennifer is claiming the spotlight. Back when Jennifer was 15, she had a case of something you might not even think exists: uncontrollable hiccups. She was even known as the Hiccup Girl. However, her hiccups finally got cured, and the media no longer had interest in her. But it seems it's just written in the stars for Jennifer to be famous.
Year-old girl suffering from a peculiar ailment, nonstop hiccuping. But her innocent demeanor quickly changed after prosecutors convicted Jennifer Mee of murder.
Almost 4 years later, she got arrested for allegedly setting up a robbery with victims she had met online. She reportedly recruited her boyfriend, Lamont Newton, and another friend, Laren Rayford, to help rob victims. Mee lured a 22-year-old man she met online into a vacant home, and her 2 friends shot and killed the man, all for $50. The 3 friends and allies were all staying together and ended up getting arrested a few hours after their operation. When Mee first got arrested and was in jail, she had a phone call with her mom, where she confessed her involvement in a conversation that was recorded. In the call, Mee also claimed she didn't kill anyone. She was just there at the wrong time and in the wrong place. She also said to her mom, "I set everything up, and it all went down wrong."
Because I set everything up, it all went wrong, but it just went downhill after everything happened.
However, the jury returned a guilty verdict, and Mee was found guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole, while being given 30 days to appeal. Her allies, Rayford and Newton, were also convicted of felony and first-degree murder and were sentenced to life in prison. Diana Lovejoy. Diana Lovejoy is an American woman who was jailed over a failed murder-for-hire attempt on her estranged husband Greg Mulvihill's life. Lovejoy hired an assassin, her lover and former Marine Weldon McDavid, to carry out the killing in September 2016. McDavid got off a shot at Mulvey Hill, but he survived, and within a week, investigators had cracked the case and arrested both suspects. The story of Diana Lovejoy, her ex-husband and her lover-cum-hired assassin, has since gone down into lore as one of the most gripping true crime stories of all time. Lovejoy married Greg Mulvey Hill, and the couple had a young child at the time of their bitter divorce and custody battle in the mid-2010s that led to her taking a series of wrong decisions that ended with her in jail and infamous all around the world. Sometime in 2016, Lovejoy and her ex-husband had engaged in a bitter custody battle over the previous year that left her feeling very unsatisfied and bitter. According to reporting from the time, Lovejoy was miffed at the 50-50 custody arrangement and with having to pay her ex-husband $120,000. To solve her problem, she turned to her then-married lover, Weldon McDavid, a veteran and firearms instructor, offering him $2,000 to kill her ex-husband. He said he had taped the evidence to a utility pole along a dirt path off Avenida Soledad in Carlsbad. Mulvey Hill left his home at that late hour, took a flashlight and a mini baseball bat, and after calling a neighbor for backup, headed up the dirt path to find out what the hell was going on. McDavid was hiding in the bushes with an AR-15 style rifle, waiting for his arrival to eliminate the threat. However, Greg and his neighbor heard some rustling when they got to the path, following which a shot rang out. Mulvey Hill was injured but survived, and McDavid fled the area.
And he shot at us like 6 or 7 times.
One of the bullets hitting 46-year-old computer programmer Greg Mulvey Hill in the left side of his chest.
He's bleeding pretty bad.
1 week after the attack, Lovejoy was arrested as the prime suspect in the crime. McDavid was arrested a short while later after authorities pieced together the entire scheme. A surveillance video showed Lovejoy purchasing the burner phone McDavid used to call her ex-husband, and a search of his home turned up the weapon used in the shooting. Cell phone tower data placed both McDavid and Lovejoy near the dirt path where the shooting took place. Investigators revealed Diana had driven her one-time lover to the area to kill her ex-husband, and DNA of McDavid was found near the scene.
Why do you want me to tell you that?
McDavid insists he was at home at the time of the shooting, and detectives give him an opportunity to prove it.
Can you give me access to your phone to show that you were home by 11?
No, I'm not. Okay, because that's fine. Well, hey, so listen. That area,
you guys are trying to accuse me of
something. No, we're not.
Well, yes, you are. Well, I'm trying to find out your version of events, and you're telling me I don't know, and I'm not giving you access to the only thing that you possess that shows where you were at.
But detectives tell McDavid they already have DNA evidence placing him at the scene of the crime.
Any reason why you would have any DNA in there? Now, DNA is something that doesn't just fly off and blow down the street. You have to go there to put it there.
Their trial was pretty straightforward, and a jury found both defendants guilty, despite their insistence they never planned on killing Mulvey Hill. McDavid said at trial that if he wanted Mulvey Hill dead, he'd be dead.
50 years to life.
I did not intend to shoot Mr. Mulvey Hill. I'm sorry that I shot Mr. Mulvey Hill. It was an aiming error, as I stated previously.
He says he was only trying to shoot a light in Mulvey Hill's hand and missed.
If I had intended to kill Mr. Mulvey Hill, he would have been dead. I never intended that.
The pair was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder last November.
I could hit that person, center mass, 100 yards away without any problem, he said. That defense was not as convincing as they'd thought it would be. McDavid received 50 years to life at the California Institution for Men in Chino and Lovejoy. Was sentenced to 26 years to life in prison.
26 years to life. That's how long Diana Lovejoy will spend in jail for a botched murder-for-hire plot.
Following the guilty verdict, Lovejoy collapsed and also bursted into tears, and McDavid wept. He later told Dateline what he regretted the most about the whole ordeal was cheating on his wife with Lovejoy.
We further find true the allegation that Diana Jean Lovejoy acted willfully, deliberately, and with premeditation within the meaning of Penal Code Section 189.
Susan Lawrence. 58-year-old Susan Lawrence was convicted of the murder of her neighbor, a 35-year-old mother, Ajik Chantrell Owens. Owens's kids had a bit of an altercation with the 58-year-old lady, and Owens went over there to confront Susan over the incident. Never did she know that it would be her last action on planet Earth. As she went over to Susan's home and began knocking on her door, that was when Susan pulled out a gun and shot Owens through the door. When police received the 911 call about the incident, they rushed over only to find an injured Owens bleeding on the floor. By the time they took her to the hospital, she was already dead. From the beginning of the case, you could easily identify one thing: Owens and her family were black while Susan was white. Susan was a racist, and the neighbors and people who lived around attested to it. A neighbor that was staying right opposite Susan stated that Susan was always angry whenever Owens' kids were outside playing, as she would always say mean things to the kids. Deputies in the neighborhood had responded to a dozen calls in respect to the feud between both parties, as this has been going on well over 2 years now, before Susan ended it by claiming the life of Ajiki Chantrell Owens. Susan even confessed in an affidavit that she used racial slurs on the kids most of the time. Susan claimed that Ajiki wanted to bring her house down. With her incessant knocking and bang of the door, she felt like the door was going to come down. She said initially she called 911 to report trespassing, but then told herself, damn it, picked up her .380 caliber handgun and blasted through the door, killing the single mother of 4. La Melodias told the court, since when does someone get shot for knocking? It was a really sad day for the entire family, as the grandmother of the kids left behind cried while speaking to Susan, telling her she left her to take care of these 4 children all by herself. She was ready to do it and give the kids the future that their mother would have wanted to give them. Diaz organized a fundraiser to help raise funds to take care of her grandkids, and a lot of people were really willing to assist.
Susan Lawrence was arrested in June of 2023 in the shooting death of 35-year-old A.J. Owens.
News 6's Catherine Silver heard from the victim's family as that sentence came down.
Susan Lawrence spent 10 minutes talking about the trauma in her life and how she was terrified that night before she read a 2-minute statement apologizing to Ajika Owens' children and family. Lawrence broke down into tears immediately after she finished speaking. It was an emotional hearing for everyone in the courtroom. The neighborhood feud between Owens and Lawrence was well documented, and after a confrontation between their children who were playing outside,
Susan was arrested in June of 2023 for the murder of black mother Ajiki Chantrell Owens. The court wasted no time in passing the verdicts, as the evidence was clear enough. The 58-year-old lady got a 25 years jail sentence as she went on to give her statement after the hearing, talking about all the trauma she had to go through, living her life all this while. She apologized to Ajike's children, and immediately after that, she broke down in tears, as it was a really emotional moment for her in court. What do you think about, were these sentences too harsh, or maybe they were perfectly justified? Let us know, and make sure to watch our next cases shown on screen.